May 18, 2025, in the icebound reaches of Siberia, at the edge of the world, a beast woke up. The Tu-95, a bomber born in the Cold War, a nuclear herald and an engine of destruction, was ready to punish any enemy of Russia. It had flown 3,800 kilometers from east to west, then launched cruise missiles at targets in Ukraine. The question is, why can a ghost that first appeared nearly 70 years ago still spread terror in the 21st century? And exactly how does it do that? After World War II ended, the Soviet Union hungered for a weapon similar to the US B-29 Superfortress. They had seen the destructive power of American bombers in the devastation inflicted on Japan. The B-29 was not included in Washington's wartime aid programs that would have allowed Moscow to access that strategic weapon. However, the Soviets got an opportunity. 4 B-29s were forced to make emergency landings on Soviet territory. That was a priceless chance for Soviet engineers to dissect and study the technical features of the American bomber. Thanks to that, they produced their own version called the Tu-4. That was followed by 2 experimental Tu-85 prototypes. Each of those had a maximum operational radius of 12,000 kilometers when carrying a 5-ton bomb load, a top speed close to 640 kilometers per hour, and a service ceiling of 11,700 meters. But they still weren't capable of crossing an ocean, dropping a nuclear bomb on critical targets in the United States, and returning safely. So the Soviet Union needed a superior solution. The task was assigned to 2 designers. One of them was Andrei Tupolev. He proposed using turboprop engines for the new aircraft. The reason was that turboprops are more fuel efficient than jet engines on very long flights, while providing greater thrust than piston engines. The first Tu-95 prototype took to the air in November 1952, but just 6 months later it was involved in a crash that killed the entire crew. Tupolev's design bureau then improved the design and introduced the Tu-95 with new, more powerful and reliable engines. It impressed the Soviet military and entered mass production from 1956. Let's examine the technical features that made this bomber famous. Start with the propulsion system. The aircraft is fitted with 4 NK-12 engines. Each can produce up to 14,800 horsepower and works with counter-rotating propellers. This design cancels the torque from the front propeller's slipstream while delivering a top speed of about 920 kilometers per hour and a range of up to 15,000 kilometers. The NK-12 is so powerful that the Tu-95 can continue flying even if half its engines fail. The aircraft is about 46 meters long, 12 meters tall, with a wingspan of 50 meters, a bit larger than the B-29 but smaller than the B-52. Its empty weight is roughly 90 tons, and its maximum takeoff weight about 188 tons, allowing it to carry the equipment and fuel needed for long-range missions. In terms of armament, the Tu-95 is equipped with twin 23 by 115 mm automatic cannons in the tail, the same caliber commonly used on other Soviet aircraft guns. The maximum firing rate of these guns is around 3,400 rounds per minute, but muzzle velocity is only 715 meters per second, lower than some modern aircraft guns. The guns are mainly for defense against enemy fighters. For offensive missions, the Tu-95 can carry external stores on wing hardpoints with a total payload of roughly 15 tons. Another option is 6 long-range Kh-55 cruise missiles carried inside the bomb bay. Each is about 6 meters long, 0.5 meters in diameter, and has a launch mass of around 1.2 tons. The Kh-55 can carry a nuclear warhead weighing about 410 kilograms with the equivalent explosive yield. The missile uses an inertial navigation system combined with terrain contour matching for guidance. It has a maximum range of about 3,000 kilometers and a circular error probable on the order of tens of meters. Alongside the Kh-55, the Tu-95 can carry 8 Kh-101 missiles in the bomb bay. These are air-launched cruise missiles designed to defeat air defense systems by flying at low altitude, hugging the terrain to avoid enemy radar detection. The Kh-101's airframe is made of radar-absorbent composite materials. The missile uses GLNOS satellite navigation combined with optical image-based positioning, achieving a circular error probable of about 10 to 20 meters. The Kh-101 is roughly 7.45 meters long, about 0.5 meters in diameter, and has a maximum launch mass of around 2.4 tons. When deployed from the carrier aircraft, these missiles don't need booster rockets. They take advantage of the aircraft's initial speed. They are equipped with turbofan cruise engines that give a cruise speed of about Mach 0.58 and a maximum speed of about Mach 0.78. The Kh-101's range is roughly 2,500 to 2,800 kilometers. It can fly at extremely low altitudes of 30 to 60 meters with a maximum operational ceiling of about 6,000 meters. Its endurance is estimated at around 10 hours. The Kh-101 carries a conventional high-explosive fragmentation warhead weighing about 450 kilograms. The Tu-95 can also carry free-fall bombs, including nuclear bombs, depending on mission requirements.
Since the Tu-95's debut in 1956, relations between the two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States, steadily deteriorated. As a result, both sides developed military strategies for the possibility of nuclear war. Neither Washington nor Moscow was willing to fall behind, despite the fact that building nuclear weapons meant courting large-scale annihilation. It was an arms race unprecedented in cost and danger. The Tu-95 became a part of it. The aircraft was frequently seen performing maritime reconnaissance missions, tracking U.S. carrier strike groups and patrolling close to foreign borders, often to the point of nearly violating other nations' airspace. As for nuclear strike missions against the United States, humanity was fortunate that such attacks never took place. Instead, the bomber was mainly used as a symbol of power, a reminder that the Soviet Union and later Russia possessed the capability to inflict catastrophic damage. On the morning of October 30, 1961, a Tu-95 took off from Olenia Air Base on the Kola Peninsula. It climbed to an altitude of 10 kilometers and headed toward Novaya Zemlya in the Arctic. There, it carried out the most powerful nuclear weapons test in human history, the detonation of the Tsar Bomba with a yield equivalent to 50 megatons of TNT. The bomb was so massive that it couldn't fit inside the Tu-95's bomb bay. Instead, it was mounted externally under the fuselage. To give the bomber time to escape, the bomb was equipped with a parachute to slow its descent, ensuring detonation at an altitude of about 4,000 meters. The aircraft was painted white, a common color for nuclear bombers at the time, thought to help reflect some of the thermal radiation. Even with those precautions, the crew's survival odds were considered very low. At 11:32 Moscow time, the bomb detonated, producing a vast fireball and a flash visible from hundreds of kilometers away. Everything within tens of kilometers of ground zero was obliterated. Windows shattered hundreds of kilometers away, and the shockwave traveled immense distances. The mushroom cloud rose dozens of kilometers high. Although the Tu-95 was shaken violently and lost about 1,000 meters of altitude, the pilot regained control and landed safely. With that test, the Soviet Union demonstrated that it possessed both the world's most powerful bomb and the reliable means to deliver it. At one point, there were even considerations of developing a nuclear-powered Tu-95, but that project was abandoned in the 1960s. Another outdated idea was to continue cramming oversized nuclear weapons inside bombers. With the advent of intercontinental ballistic missiles, the need for long-range strategic bombers declined sharply. By the end of the Cold War, around 500 Tu-95s had been built. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, this massive fleet was largely grounded, with many airframes left behind in the newly independent republics. Few of those nations had the capability to operate the Tu-95. A year later, Kazakhstan began returning the bombers stationed at its air bases to Russia. As Moscow plunged into financial crisis, the Tu-95's global presence gradually diminished over the following years. The once feared machine of destruction, an icon of Cold War power, faded into memory. But everything changed when a new leader came to power. 7 years after assuming office, President Vladimir Putin ordered the resumption of long-range patrols, something Russia had not done since 1991. In January 2008, a Tu-95 and a Tu-142, accompanied by an IL-78 tanker, conducted exercises over the waters near France and Spain. In 2015, 2 Tu-95s appeared off the coast of the United Kingdom, prompting the Royal Air Force to scramble interceptors. Between 2020 and 2021, similar incidents occurred over the North Atlantic, North Sea, Baltic Sea, and Black Sea, forcing NATO fighters to respond to intercept the Tu-95s.
Nearly 60 years after its debut, the Tu-95 saw real combat in Syria. On November 17, 2015, these bombers struck several rebel targets. When Russia launched its special military operation, this type of bomber took part in the opening strikes. On March 6, 2022, a Tu-95 and a Tu-160 launched numerous cruise missiles at targets in Ukraine from the Black Sea area. Later on June 26th, bombers were again scrambled. Recently, we witnessed Tu-95 sorties that marked a significant shift in how Russia employs strategic bombers. On the night of May 18, 2025, from the remote Belayar Air Base in Siberia, a long-range, sophisticated airstrike campaign began. 2 Tu-95s took off escorted by a pair of IL-78 tanker aircraft. As noted earlier, the Tu-95 already has long range. With IL-78 support, they can fly roughly 3,800 kilometers to the Ukrainian border without landing en route. Upon reaching the Engels area in Saratov province, The bombers launched about 94 Kh-101 cruise missiles. While the specific targets in Ukraine have not been confirmed, Kh-101s are typically used against high-value assets, such as military bases or infrastructure. After missile launch, the Tu-95s and Il-78s landed safely at an inland base, an important installation of the Russian Air Force. The operation was completed successfully. The strike originating from Belaya marked a turning point in how Russia organizes air attacks on Ukraine. Previously, launches typically came from bases near the front. Now Russia is sending bombers from a Siberian base more than 3,800 kilometers from the combat zone. This move reflects a strategic shift, exploiting the great depth of Russian territory to increase surprise and force Ukraine to disperse its already limited defensive resources. Moving the launch point to Belaya diversifies attack axes. Ukraine's long-standing early warning and intelligence focus has centered on bases in the west. Now it is forced to extend surveillance all the way to Siberia, making reconnaissance more complex and more costly. By changing launch locations, Russia forces the opponent to thin out air defenses, degrading the ability to concentrate warning and interception systems. Second, the new tactics disrupt Ukraine's predictive patterns. When attacks originate from familiar locations, analysts can estimate flight time, approach vectors, and intercept windows relatively accurately. But when bombers depart from unexpected bases like Belaya, reaction time is disrupted, giving cruise missiles a better chance to penetrate deeper into Ukrainian territory before detection and interception. This yields both tactical effect and psychological pressure on the adversary. Third, using distant bases helps protect Russia's strategic bomber force. Although old, the Tu-95 still plays an important role in long-range strike capability. Western bases in Russia have been vulnerable to Ukrainian UAV strikes. Basing bombers at Belaya places them beyond the reach of Ukrainian UAVs, lowering the risk of sabotage and helping maintain the fleet for extended operations. Another important factor is support from Il-78 tankers, which extend the Tu-95's time aloft and enable more complex routing. With aerial refueling, the bombers can avoid heavily monitored areas and take circuitous routes that conceal attack intentions until the last moment, increasing unpredictability and forcing Ukraine's early warning systems to consider many more scenarios. From a strategic perspective, changing the launch point is not only an operational tactic, but also has psychological and political dimensions. It forces Ukraine and its allies to remain constantly vigilant and accept a higher degree of uncertainty. That is Russia's aim, to stay on the offensive by making the opponent reactive. The move reflects a new direction in Russian air doctrine, alternating launch points across its vast territory to create flexibility and resilience. Combining remote bases with complex flight paths, and even launching from multiple directions, could overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses. A feint from one direction, while the main strike comes from another, would be particularly dangerous. Russia has also signaled readiness to trial other options from even more isolated bases. With infrastructure networks across Siberia and the Far East, Russia can apply this tactic to turn its entire territory into a military chessboard. To respond, Ukraine must expand radar coverage, boost reconnaissance, and invest in intelligence, all requiring significant funds and technology that are hard for it to secure. It can be said that using Belaya Air Base was a calculated move by Russia, part of a strategy to sustain offensive capability, preserve key forces, and place a long-term burden on the opponent. This change marks a new phase in the conflict. Airspaces become more complex and unpredictable, forcing Ukraine and its allies to adapt to an adversary that knows how to exploit territorial depth to retain the initiative.